what's going on, everybody? Bauer Brown here. Welcome back to the channel, everyone, and welcome to video number 1 in the Spline Street Constructor tutorial series. Okay, there's going to be a few videos in this because there's a lot to go over. All right, so I know a bunch of you guys have been asking and waiting patiently, for some sort of tutorial video on Spline Street Constructor, and I've been dragging my feet a little bit on it. Not for any particular reason, or at least none that I need to worry you guys about right now. But anyhow, I guess it's about time to get on with it and show you guys how I use Spline Street Constructor. All right, now going into this, first and foremost, let me put out there that I am not an expert by any means in Crossing Constructor or Spline Street Constructor. So if you're looking for that magic bullet or the ultimate tutorial, I don't know. We're just going to have to see how it goes. All right. I do have a fair amount of experience with it. I can't say it's any more than, I don't know, you're most people out there, but I do okay for myself, I guess. All right. The one thing I will say is, as far as Spline Street Constructor goes, the videos that are out there, the way that they're utilizing this program, it's mind-boggling to me. It's very slow and tedious process that they're doing, and it does not need to be that way. Okay, and what I'm going to show you guys, it's life-changing, honestly, compared to the way most people are utilizing the program. All right, now I have seen a few videos out there that do it the same way that I do. And good for them. All right. So at least those guys have had their thinking cap on. All right. So let's jump right into this with Spline Street Constructor. Okay. We're not going to jump right into the streets themselves. When I work with Spline Street Constructor and I am making my streets, the very first thing I do is I start with my intersections. Okay. I start with my crossings. So to start this tutorial off, we're going to be getting into the Crossing Constructor first. All right, so I hate to disappoint you guys that we're hoping for the Spline Street Constructor part, but we are starting with Crossing Constructor. All righty, so to get this party started, obviously the first thing we're going to need is a copy of Crossing Constructor. All right, this is very exciting. I can't wait for this. All right, so to get your copy, it's available most places on the internet. Well, maybe not most places. You're not gonna find a copy at Bed Bath & Beyond, but if you Google it, you can find a copy fairly easily. All right. Now, luckily for us, I do have a copy on my website. So if you head on over to BauerBrown.com, I do have a copy on there. You want to go into downloads, miscellaneous, and then click on Crossing Constructor, and that'll bring you up to this page. Now, just a quick note, you must be registered and logged in to be able to download or interact with the site in any way. And that just kind of protects us all from like scrapers and bots and that types of thing, and spam and, the malicious characters out there. All right. So you get the idea. But anyhow, once you go ahead and register, log in, download your copy, put it someplace you're able to find it again, and we'll get started. All right. So it will come in a zip format. So make sure you unzip it first. All right. And this is not a mod in any way. Okay. So you're not going to have to put this in your mods folder or anything like that. This is a standalone application, okay? So this is just a regular program we're going to run. All right, so for those of you who don't know, now you would be surprised. I've had people try. Say it's in their mods folder. It's not doing a darn thing. And let's not go down that path. All right, so anyhow, get that thing unzipped, right? So you should have a folder that looks something like this. Now, the location for where you unzip this to, like I said, don't put it in your mods folder, but outside of that, doesn't really matter. You can put it wherever you would like, wherever your little heart desires, okay? Just make sure it's accessible and easy to get to, because we're going to be in and out of this folder fairly often as we work on our projects here, okay? I'd even going as far as keeping a copy in my actual mod map folder, right? I would copy the entire Crossing Constructor and just put it right in my mod map. This way, when I needed to go in and out of that folder, I didn't have to go very far. All right. Told you, I'm lazy. I will find an easy way to do just about anything. If it exists, I'm going to sniff it out and use the heck out of it. All right, but anyhow, so go ahead and get that thing unzipped. So we have a Crossing Constructor folder like you see here. All right, looking inside of there, there's not a whole lot going on there. We have our the program itself, our executable here for Crossing Constructor. All these gear looking things here, those are INI files. Those are our configuration files, okay? They're going to come in handy as we work on our projects, and I'll explain a little bit more about those when we get to that point. We have a few textures in here. Road 1, 2, 3, you get the idea. You can see these are going to come in handy as well. This Fashion folder, basically the same thing. We have some configuration files, a few textures, and a test i3D. All right, so that's about it for that. Let's not waste any time. Oh yeah, one more thing. The PDF. Now keep in mind, if you download this from the internet, from one of those random sites that you found, most likely the instructions are going to be in German. All right. Luckily for us, again, I was nice enough to translate those instructions from German over to English. All right. So, and it's not because I speak fluent German, which I do not. It's just that I'm very good at using the translate program. All right. So that's what I did anyhow. I translated them over to English, so you don't have to do that yourself. Okay. So everything is in English for you guys now. Like I said, this is if you download the copy from my website. If not, if you ended up getting one of those miscellaneous copies out there, what's still in German, it's not hard to translate. All right. So probably not a bad idea to have the English version, because as we go over this, like I said, there's a lot to cover, and we can probably spend 2 or 3 videos just on the Crossing Constructor. Okay. We're going to stick to the very basics. So at one point or another, you're going to want to refer back to the instructions to kind of, familiarize yourself with the program and just, get acquainted with things on your own. Just kind of read over it once or twice, experiment a little bit. We will be covering some things, but like I said, there's some legwork you're going to have to do on your own at one point or another. Okay. So that was the other thing there. We have the instructions. All right, back to the folder. Where were we? Okay, let's get in here. All right, so next, let's just fire that bad boy up, see what we get. I'll use my Giants editor as my background here. All right, so we have a few things going on inside of here. Let's start with that. I'm going to explain just basically what the sections are, what everything kind of does, and then we'll start getting into some examples of things, okay? And then now that's the other thing too. Not only are the instructions in German, the actual interface, the UI for the program itself is also in German. So, right about now, you should be wishing you had taken German in school instead of, 6 years of French, which I did. Now, actually, believe it or not, I did take exactly 6 years of German in school. It didn't get me very far, unfortunately. That's some stuff I'm still okay with. Other stuff, maybe not so much, but not that I want to show my age, but high school is, very long time ago. Very long time ago. All right. Anyhow, moving forward. All right. Where do I want to start this? Let me grab a pencil tool here just because I like to use it. Let's see. Where are you, pencil? Not sure if I want to use that. We'll start with this. We'll do it this way. All right. So the first thing we got up here at the very top of the screen, right in here where it says i3D file. Okay. So what are they looking for there? All right. This is going to be when we create our intersection and we have a finished product. It's going to save it as an i3D that we are going to need to import into our project. All right. So clicking on this. All right. What you want to do is navigate over to your project itself. Okay. So get yourself out of here. Maybe let's see here. Basically, like I said, you just want to get yourself back to your project. So I'm going to go into my tutorial series. Inside of objects here, I have roads. All right. So I already have one in there. It's called intersection. So if this wasn't here, all right, let's say we can delete this. All right, so it's blank, right? So all you want to do is go down here to file name, type in, you can name it anything you want, anything that's going to help you remember that this is an intersection that you created, all right? And then you click save, all right? And that's all that thing does, right? So each intersection that you create is going to always save it to this file, right? This intersection.i3d. Now, there's a few different ways that you can do this, okay? As you go, depending on, you know, the complexity of your map and things like that, you're going to have pretty many intersections by the time you're done. Now, one way that you could do it, which I do not personally do it this way, is each time you create one, you can go up here and change this file name, intersection 1, intersection 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You get the idea. All right. You may or may not want to do it that way. I don't really recommend that way, only because it's very time consuming. You end up with so many copies of this intersection. You'll find out that once you make one type of intersection, you're going to reuse that intersection pretty often throughout your map, and you're going to be copying or duplicating within Giants Editor. You're not really going to have to remake it every single time. All right, so like I said, just make one for now, and we'll just keep using that one. All right, so next thing on our list here, or moving down through the program interface, is I'm not even going to try to pronounce half these words right here, but we have basically, this is the border. Okay, this is the border for maybe this means road segments or something, maybe. Not sure. We could always check the instructions and follow along if you think that's going to help you at all. What do we got there? There's road texture, road geometry, maybe? No. Oh, right here. Parameters for the margins. Anyhow, so like I said, let me just skip by that and just keep to explaining. It's probably a little bit easier that way anyhow. All right. So like I said, this is basically, this is your border. All right. So starting from the top here, this is the texture, this verge diffuse that you see here. This is going to be the texture that we're going to use for the border. Now with border, what I mean by border is if you look at like any one of your intersections that you create, right? If you look at it from like a side profile, all right, so this would be just a flat, well, not very flat, but that would be your intersection, right? With no border. Now you might have seen this on streets or other objects in other maps. All right, when they put this border, sometimes they have like these little wings that point downward. It could be any angle, any different shape, right? But that is your border. And it helps that if your road doesn't sit completely flat on your map, this helps fill up some of that, some of those gaps that might be visible. Now, I don't personally, it depends. I have in the past, I've used these borders. I had textures that worked really well for my map and it looked outstanding. But outside of that, I tend not to use them. I just use a regular flat intersection. Same with Spline Street Constructor, only because one, you know, I usually flatten my areas ahead of time so I can get my road to lay fairly flat. And you can create your own border at this point. See that whatever you use for your texture is going to have to match fairly well, you know, with your map. If it doesn't, it can stand out. It can look kind of weird. So if you don't have a texture that looks really good with your project, I tend to just leave it out. And you'll get a feel for it as you go. Not only that, but trying to, like, when you fill in your ground, like when you're using your sculpt tool, right? So you're trying to level your ground like this up to the area, like level with your roadway. You know, sometimes you don't get it all. And that's where the texture becomes important. Like this area right here, you can see where if I didn't fill it in right, you know, this would be visible. And I don't know, to me, your road doesn't look so straight anyway. I don't know. It's just something about it that I'm not super psyched about. So I don't always use it, but I do encourage you to experiment, try out some different things and see what you get. All right. So anyhow, that's the texture. So just by clicking on the, let me get off of this modes here. So just by clicking on the folder, that'll open up a dialog box for you that you can pick out which texture you want to use. Now, concerning textures, okay, what we're going to need to do is if you look at my mod map here, okay, you can name this anything you want. I'm not even sure why I have the objects folder here, but I have a folder called roads. All right. Now in here, you can see I have, you know, a handful of textures that basically I just copied these out of my Crossing Constructor folder. All right. And maybe one or two miscellaneous that I may have gotten from somewhere else. All right. Maybe a Street Constructor possibly. All right. So when you assign a texture Now, whether it's the intersection or the road surface texture itself, or whether it's the border texture, it needs to go in the same folder wherever you save that intersection, that i3D that we created, right? This up here, this very top side up here where it says i3D, wherever you save this, your textures need to be in that same folder, right? They need to sit at the same level. If not, when you import your intersection or your road section or whatever you're working on, it's just going to look white, right? It's not going to have any kind of texture or anything. Next thing on the list down here, we have the length at 20 meters. Now, this is the texture length, and I'm not quite sure what they mean by this, to be honest. As far as meters, I mean, obviously it's only, it's a DDS file, so you can't really measure it in meters. So there must be some kind of conversion there that I'm not aware of. What I will let you know, with most of the parameters that you're going to see here on the Crossing Constructor, the default parameters are usually pretty good. You can get away with the default parameters. You don't have to get all crazy changing things up. Again, what I recommend you do is experiment. All right. So find yourself a texture, try it out, see how it looks one way, and then maybe come over and change this from 20 over to 10 and see how it looks then. I tend to do that pretty often, like 20 meters. I'm not sure where they're getting that meters from. All right. And then below that, this start value, I'm going to explain that in a little bit. Since this program doesn't work like as far as like textures go, if you're familiar with like UV textures, how the texture is mapped to a certain area of the image, this doesn't work that way. And so what we can do is we can tell it, hey, we want you to start looking at the texture here, stop looking here. All right. So we don't have to use the entire texture. We can just use a piece of it. And I'll show you an example of that as we go along. All right. So next down on the list, we have the road segments down here. At least that's what I'm calling them, or the border segments. All right. Now, what I explained to you earlier, all right. So when you had your intersection, it looks something like this. All right. This road segment, look, so segment number 1, Spline Street Constructor has an actual interface that you can view the segments that you're creating. This one does not have it, unfortunately. All right. But it starts all your segments are connected together. So one segment, 1 meter long, or segment number 1, the length of 1 meter at an angle of -30. The end, I'll have to look that up in the instructions to see what the end means. But you would end up that looks something a little bit like this. Okay. Now you can put, by hitting either this up arrow key here or this plus button, you can add a second segment, right? So this would change to a number 2. You could also make that 1 meter long. Maybe you want to give it like a -10 or something like that. And then you'll have an additional segment. All right. So it all depends. Again, you're going to have to play around. It depends on this is the angle, this Winkel here. That's the angle. All right. So if you give it like a -90, I don't know, maybe that'll look in something like that. Something crazy. You get the idea. All right. Spline Street Constructor, you're going to be able to visualize this. All right. You're going to get a visual. So for now, like I said, the default values work pretty well. You don't really have to mess with that outside of that. What I really want to do ultimately is just get you familiar with the program itself and get something that works, right? So you didn't have to change all sorts of parameters. You didn't have to get real fancy with, basically it works out of the box. That's what I'm trying to get you guys to do, be able to create roadways that you didn't have to, have a whole lot of experience or work super hard trying to figure things out to get this roadway done. All right. So we're trying to stick as close as we can to the default parameters. All right. So up here in the middle here, we're going to start moving up to the middle. This is the geometry for our road surface itself. All right. So we're going to have a width of 7 meters. So our road is going to be 7, or our intersection is going to be 7 meters. So through Spline Street Constructor, if you're creating a 7 meter wide roadway, you obviously want a 7 meter wide intersection. 10 meter wide roadway, 10 meter intersection. You get the idea. All right. So this next one here, this Winkel again, it's an angle for the smaller the number. All right. The more, actually, let's go over the instructions really quick and I'll read it to you here. What do we got? We got the length. Hey, what does it say about length in meters? Length of the texture in meters. If the road is longer than a texture, we continue periodically. Very short textures are continued by reflection. Blah, blah, blah. All right. So I'm still not seeing how they come up with a length. All right. So indicates the angle of the edge segment with respect to the roadway. This is not what I'm looking for. Transform group. Maybe that is what I'm looking for there. Parameters for the margins. Miscellaneous. Like I said, there's a lot to be learned through these instructions here. So I can't recommend enough that you guys refer back to this every once in a while. All right. The angle for dividing the radii, the smaller the value, the more rounder the intersection, but also more vertices and triangles. All right. So this all comes down to performance, like it says right here. This is something to keep in mind. If any of you guys have any experience with any 3D programs such as Blender, Maya, that sort of thing, you're going to be familiar, with vertices and triangles and that sort of thing. And the more you have, the more you are impacting your performance. All right. So we want to keep this to a minimal so it still looks good, but you're not using a crazy amount of vertices and triangles and that sort of thing and just killing the performance of the map because it all adds up. Right. So when you get into all your different, like your weight maps, maybe you got all kinds of crazy with that and they're really huge, or you're like me and you just obliterated your map with trees and it all adds up. So when possible, like I said, the name of the game here is performance. When possible, try to keep everything, as low as you can go and have it still perform well and look good. And then everything will be okay across the board. Okay. So like I said, default value is 15, and that usually works pretty well. I will show you some examples of how this can be affected. Here, I'm not going to try to pronounce it, but I believe this here is a subdivision. All right. So if you have like lines or anything like that on the edges of your roadway, they tend to warp and distort and maybe not look so great. And you can subdivide those textures so it actually straightens it out. It looks a little bit better. Again, I will give you an example as we get there. All right. Next down on the list, we have this is the actual texture for the roadway itself. Same thing here. You can go ahead and just click on the folder to pick your texture, find out what you want. Again, it comes in length of 20 meters. Not sure what the length is all about. I know my texture is not 20 meters long. I really wish I knew how they were trying to figure out any texture is 20 meters long. I get there's probably a conversion, but what is it? I don't know. All right. And then this same thing here with this start and this end. I will explain this. All right. Like I said, this is part of like the UV mapping thing. It's not UV mapping itself, but we can tell the program to only use a certain portion of the texture. Okay. All right. And then transform groups. If you check this box down here, any of your intersections are going to be created. The intersection itself, like each branch of the intersection is going to have its own transform group, which comes in handy. If you read in the instructions of why that's there, it says that you can make roads seamlessly. And I really haven't figured out the best way to use that, to be honest. So I don't do a whole lot of work with that. And then, all right. So yeah, I don't do a whole lot of work with that. Sometimes I've been trying though. I've been experimenting with different things to see if I can figure out the best way to use that. And last but not least, well, maybe not last, but we have the angle and the radius of the actual branches of our intersection itself. Okay. And so I'm going to explain how we come up with the angles, because that's probably the hardest part of this program, is figuring out how in the heck are they working these angles. All right. So say you want one intersection or one branch at 90 degrees. You want another one at 180 degrees. Well, how do you put that all into the program and have it make sense? Because trust me, you're just going to be throwing numbers at this thing for a while, trying to figure it out. And you may get close, but it took me a while to figure out what the heck they were doing here. All right. And then the radius is the angle of the intersection itself. And I'll give you almost all of these. I'm going to give you some kind of visual example. Okay. Just wanted to kind of go over things ahead of time to let you know what is what. And then load parameter, save parameter. So say you're working on your project, you have everything all real nice in here, set up just the way you like it. Maybe you're doing things a particular way on one map compared to another map. All right. So you want to save the parameter, save these parameters, just click on the save button, make sure we're in our project folder, which we are. Right. And then we can, save your parameter, name it tutorial. or whatever your map name is. Okay. So next time you come in, say you go work on a different map, you're using your program somewhere else. You have all these parameters are all changed. When you come back into this project, you can just reload that parameter. Okay. This INI, you just go find tutorial, load that up, and then you're good to go. Everything will come back to the way that you had it set and you can continue working. All right. And then the copy memo thing, basically is if you have any kind of faults or anything like that, that would show up down here in this little status bar down here. All right. That's what, you can copy that and basically send it off to somebody and say, hey, what does this mean? So you get the idea. All right. So that was a brief XML. I can't say it was too brief, but that was kind of an explanation of the interface. All right. Once again, I can't recommend enough that you guys go through the instructions and just read very carefully over and over and over. I have used this program for quite a few years now, and I still refer back to the instructions. Maybe not as often as I used to, but I still refer back to the instructions. All right. So these guys are going to end up doing the same thing. It's the only way to learn. You can't rely on me because sometimes I don't know squat. And maybe this is one of those days. So, all righty. So let's get into some examples. What do you say? We're about 24 minutes into this. Oh, I'm not sure how long I want these videos to drag on, but we got some time. So let's head back over to the Giants editor itself, and let's start working on some examples. All right. So like I said, all of your textures need to be in the same folder. So once we create these intersections, everything shows up nice for you. So go ahead and make that folder somewhere within your project that we're going to keep all of this stuff. You have your program fired up. Now we're going to start with the basics. I'm going to stick with the angles the way that they have this all set up, 120 degree angles at a 3 meter radius. And then I'll show you the differences between the border, no border. So let's just go ahead and click go. All right. And then you can see that we had this intersection pop up there, this I3D. All right. And all we're going to do is we're going to drag that into our project. Okay. So we imported it that way. We'll hit Control B. I can see I got some blankety blanks there already. See, I just got done telling you guys to make sure your textures are in the right folder. And here I am not having my textures in the right folder. All right, road diffuse, we'll go with this one here. Yes. And then for the verge, we'll use that. Okay. So let's try this again. Yeah, there's a lot of back and forth between your folders. Like each time you do this, you're going to have to be importing a lot. But like I said, once you have one intersection that you're going to find out you're going to be reusing that intersection quite often. All right, so this is what we have here for an out-of-the-box intersection, okay? This is what it looks like when we just made a straight old intersection, imported it. This does have the border on it, all right? So what you're looking at, right here, this bottom section right here, this is the border. All right, so one of the examples that I want to show you with the UV thing, right, is if you look at this here, see we have this top area right here where it's stone, and then it starts grass. All right. The way this texture is, if I go over to, if I go into and have a look at this texture itself, you can see on the left-hand side of that texture, I do have some sort of gravel and then it starts grass. But let's say I don't want that gravel there. Maybe when I put this down on my map, I just don't like the look of it. I don't like the way that gravel looks. I just want it to be grass. What if I have a grassy texture that I really like, or you know what I'm trying to say? Say I just want the grass. All right. So I'm not going to give you too many examples of this. So let's go in here and we're going to start. So 0 would be the extreme left edge of our texture. All right. So that would be this edge right here, left edge. So we're going to start there. But instead, we're going to change that value and I'm going to tell it start at 1. Now, I'm not sure where it starts counting, but let's say this is 0 here. And then we got 1. Maybe 2 and then 3. I'm not 100% on numbers like this, but it's something like this. All right. So instead of like starting at 0 and then reading the whole texture this way, now we're going to start at 1 and read from here over. You get what I'm saying? All right. So let's go back in there. All right. Oops. Got to get rid of this pencil tool. I wish I could keep it up and still use it as a pointer, but I can't. Darn you, pencil tool. All right. So let's head back in here. Let's change this to 1. All right. Recreate that roadway. or the intersection. All right, we're going to re-import it. All right, and let's put this down and see what kind of difference we got here. All right, we'll lift this one up a little bit, and we'll lift this one up a little bit so we can compare the two of them. All right, so you can immediately see the difference between the two. All right, see how this one has the gravel and it just starts getting into the grass, and this one has just the grass. All right, and that's all because we changed this start value. All right, so like I said, 0 is the extreme left-hand side of the texture, and then incrementally, as you move across the texture, is what happens when you change this value. So basically, without having to recreate a new texture or anything like that, I was able to cut out the gravel and use just the grass part of the texture. You know, I didn't have to, like I said, I didn't have to go into an image editor or create a whole new texture, nothing like that. It was that easy, right? Really, really, really simple. All right, so the next thing I want to show you maybe is subdivision. All right, so if you're looking at this right here, right, when we have textures that have, you know, like maybe white lines on the side of the road. Now, this is a pretty decent one as far as I'm concerned. I'd be okay with this. But if you're looking at these lines that you can see right in here, right, these white lines that, oops, that's not what I wanted. These white lines that go across the sides, all right, they tend to warp depending on what you're doing, like what angles you have going on, what type of intersection you're trying to make. These lines can get fairly warped. All right, let me see if I can think of a good example of this. Let's say if we use, let's go with 180 and 25. All right, we'll try that. And I'm going to explain to you guys in just a little bit how those angles work. You know, I've been doing this enough that I got a pretty good idea of what I need to type in there. But if you're new to the program, it can be a little bit daunting at first that you can't quite figure out what they're asking of you guys. All right, so let's plunk this down. Lift that up a little bit. Okay, so there you go. Now you can see we got one that's a little more. See this white line up here, right? This little happy face we got going on. Sorry, I can't resist. Anyhow, oh my God, Bauer, you need help. I swear, some days I feel I should be institutionalized. All right, but this anyhow, so that the edges, you can see my lines on the edges here look pretty decent, right? So they don't look too bad. It's this up here doesn't look so great. You can even see the texture starts to warp a little bit. It doesn't look as clean as it did on this side. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to head back into this program. I'm going to keep everything here, like roundness wise, it looks okay. So 15 is doing a pretty decent job. And what you'll notice when your roundness is not quite right, like I said, the default value looks pretty good, but you'll start to see like a rounded corner that looks more, you'll see the actual segments, right? So it'll look like lines put together, like more of an octagon than a circle. All right. But when you start breaking this down into a smaller number, instead of like that octagon shape, you know, something like this, where you can see all the flat edges, it'll start, you know, to be more of a round shape. All right. So that's kind of what that does for you. But like I said, it does it at a cost. All right. And you take a performance hit. Don't get me wrong, like 1, 2, 3 intersections, even a handful of intersections, it's not going to make a huge deal. And you may never even notice, but everything adds up. So you don't want to take the chance. Just keep everything to a minimum when you can. All right, so let's click on this subdivision right here. So we're going to we'll just subdivide it at 1 meter and see what we get. All right. And what that's going to do is it's going to subdivide this area right here, this angle, and it's going to break it down into smaller portions so we can get a cleaner looking line here instead of that warp line. All right, so let's recreate that. Let's go back up in the roads. We'll re-import it. Alrighty. Oops. Let's plunk this one down next to it. See what we get here. Oh my, that one's like night and day. Look at that. All right, so you can see how it warped the heck out of that line right there. But what is simple 1 meter subdivision, look how clean that line is. That is beautiful. Now this is actually a good example, right? See how you can see all these segments here? on each one of these, you can see, how it's not completely round. You can see the flat like faces here, right? That's what that subdivision, not the subdivision that we just did. That's what I'll go back and I'll show you really quick. That's what this is going to fix. I'll even give you an example of that, right? Because examples is, how you learn things. All right. So how that had that kind of not clunky. To me, that looked pretty good. All right. But if we lower this down to, let's say 10, we'll create another one. All right. Did I create that? Yes, I did. Let me import it. Like I said, experimentation. The more you guys work with this program, you're not going to have to stick with just default values. If something doesn't look exactly right, you're going to be able to refine it a little bit. Like this, most guys will probably leave that in their map because they don't know any better. All right. But once you figure out that, just a quick, change of the number, you can subdivide and you can have everything looking very, very nice, just like this instead of, what you have there. All right. So now this one here, we just did another kind of like another subdivision. All right. So you can see things look a little more rounder than what they did over here. All right. See how that one's a little clunkier. Now it's not leaps and bounds better, but it's definitely better. This one, you can see more of the flat faces, and this one looks, a lot more smooth, a lot more rounder. All right. So that's what some of those values do. All right. So the angle, we'll do that next. I'll show you guys the angle here, and this is the radius. All right. So depending on your intersection, how this intersection is set up, what kind of street you're using, this small 3 meter, this is 3 meter right here. That might work pretty good, but maybe you need this a little bit more spread out. You need something a little bit bigger. Like I said, it all depends on your map. It all depends on the application. We can change that. All right. So I'm going to put this back on 15 just because I think that looked good there. We'll keep the subdivision on because that looked pretty good. But now we're going to change our radius here. We're going to change all of these to 6, and we're going to make that just a little bit bigger. All right. Let's recreate the roadway. All right. Yeah, kind of a pain that you have to re-import this every single time. These are things that I always wish that Giants would just somehow add into the editor itself, that you can just create these things from right within the editor and just use them right there on the spot. No problem. Lift that up a little bit. All right. So now you can see the difference, right? And not only, whoa. So not only does your radius get bigger, but to accommodate that bigger radius, the intersection itself also got bigger. All right. So you don't have to really worry about the overall size because it's going to fit no matter where you put it. Well, not no matter where you put it, obviously, but it's going to fit. The thing to remember is that this is still whatever that was set at 6 meters, I believe. Was it 6 meters? I can't get in there right now. So each one of these roads, this part doesn't change. Okay. This is the 6 meter part. So when it's telling you, asking you for the width of your roadway, right here it's 7 meters. It's talking about, this width up here, the road coming in, going out. All right. So that's the width. All right. So like I said, depending on your application, depending on how your road setup looks, you can change your radius, to get, an entirely different look to this. So you can see that we didn't really make it too far into. All we did was, work on maybe the texture a little bit, subdivide it a little bit, change the radius. And just between those few things, we were able to drastically change, maybe not over, too drastic, but we're still able to change the overall, look of the generated intersection. So what do you think? Pretty good stuff, right? I definitely think so. This is the kind of stuff I live for. All right. So with the whole start and end on the texture thing, right? So we have the same thing. Keep in mind that we have the same thing down here for our main road texture, right? So if you have a texture that, maybe it's got some kind of border on it, maybe it's like a cracked edge, or you've seen them before. I know that you have. But basically what you could do is you can cut those edges out of there. All right. So what it would be is the start would be from the left going to the right. So 0 would be the far left. The end would be from the right going to the left. right? So if you put start at 1 and end at 1, that means you're coming in 1 from the left, and you're also coming in 1 from the right. So you're cutting out maybe the edges of the roadway. So I do probably have an example of it somewhere. Let's see if we go into, I'm not sure if I have it in Crossing Constructor. I know Street Constructor, I probably definitely have one in there. Yeah, if we'll just pick one of these at random. All right, so if you take a road like this, for example, let's open this up. And all of these textures, by the way, these are just a regular old DDS. Now, I have tons of textures, but unfortunately, I can't really upload them all, only because the whole entire package is over 6 gigabytes. So it's tons and tons of them, but I have whole packages like this. All right, but they are only DDS files. All right, so if you look at that folder that I was just in, all right, so you can see that it's a 1024 by 2048. Nothing overly crazy. You can create these on your own very easily on any one of these these imaging applications, these image editors. All right, so it's not hard at all to do. All right, so you can, like I said, you can put together your entire customized texture package specific to your map. Look really good. All right, so that start and end. So what would happen here? All right, so maybe we're start by going in 1. All right, and what that would give us, we're going in 1 from the left. So we would start right in here. Ooh, that was a pretty straight line. All right, feel good about that one. And the end would be on the right of the texture. Now, obviously, we're not using this whole texture. Say we're just using the street part. Don't worry about this bottom half. But if we go in 1 and end of 1, we would start right in here somewhere. Okay. And then we would end up with just this middle area in here is what we would use. So we would basically cut the edges off of that image, if we didn't need those, those edges. So that's how that works. So instead of like going into an image editor and then, having to choose this area, crop it, resize it, we don't really need to do that. We can tell the program itself like, hey, I only want to use a certain part of this picture, and this is the part that I want to use. Okay. So keep that in mind also. All right. So let's see here. Oh, example wise, I don't know. Can I give you any more examples as far as the interface goes? Let's see. We went over the border, so you should know pretty much about the border. The segments is going to take a little bit of work to, figuring out the segments. Now, the way that the whole segment thing works is when you bring this up. Oops. God, darn it. Things are not working the way I want them to. All right. So you have a look at our segment in here. We can change this angle to anything you want. All right. See how that kind of has this downward facing point to it? Just by changing, this is a -30. So we can change that to a -20 or a -10. So it's not as steep. Maybe it comes out this way a little bit more, instead of, oops, I keep taking these screenshots by accident. So this is -30. So instead of coming down at this angle, maybe you only want to come -10 and have it at that angle. Or, maybe you want to have it -10, and then you want to add a second one, right? A second segment to this and have that at -30. So, it looks a little more like that. I know that's pretty horrible drawing there, but anyhow, you get the idea. So that's one thing that I'm really not going to get too much into with as far as giving you a demonstration, but it would be something as simple as clicking the plus button. You can see how that went to add it to 2. All right, so let's put a 1 meter segment. This one we're going to make angle. We'll do another. Let's just do -10. Okay. And in this end, I'm kind of thinking the end might be like the same thing for this texture. I'm not sure what they get on end. Like if you look at the other one, that's at 0.2. I'm not sure what they mean by that. So let's stick with the same 0.2. All right. So let's generate that. Let's go in the roads, re-import. All right. Here is our new roadway that we just made. All right, so you can see, whoa, maybe that 0.2 didn't work so good for my for my texture there. All right, so you can see how that changing that number, it does have something to do with the texture. All right, so I might want to play around with that number and find something that works a little bit better. But you can see what that did for us there, okay? Where it added this extra segment. You know, it added one more segment off at a minus 10 degrees, 1 meter long. You get the idea. So this is, like I said, this is a lot of this you're going to have to discover on your own just by playing around. This is how you get good at things. This is how you get familiar with things. And I can't recommend enough to experiment. Go back through the instructions, see what does what, read up on it, do exactly what I just did here. You know, make yourself an intersection, test it out, see how it looks. Go in, change some numbers around, try it again, see how it looks. You know, keep doing that a few tries until you get something that, you know, that you're happy with. And then you get a pretty good feel for the way that everything's working. Everything looks pretty good. All right. So I got 15 minutes left before we hit the 1 hour mark. So we're going to do one other thing here. And I'm going to show you how they are figuring out the angles on this. Okay. Now the angles, I got a little tool here that I want to help you out with. Okay. So let me find an intersection. Maybe, I'm not sure what would be a good one. Right here. We'll use this one right here. Okay. So let's start with this intersection right here. Now, when you create an intersection, all right, it's going to read this in angles. Now, I have a tool that I want to use that I brought in specifically for this purpose, and that is a protractor. I know, I'm just a little crazy. All right, so I'm going to put this protractor so that 0 is basically where I am standing. Let me see. I can't see my green line here. Oh yeah, this green on white. It's not a really good look. Yeah, I can't see it. There it is. Oh yeah, that was not easy to see. My goodness. All right, so when you're trying to figure out your angle, at least as far as this protractor is concerned, always figure it out going counterclockwise in the area that you're standing. So say I want to make this intersection and I'm going to be facing this way. All right. So here's my blue arrow on my protractor is facing that way. Here's 0, right about where I would be standing. All right. So I want my first branch of my intersection is going to be right here. Okay. This is going to be branch number 1. Because remember, like I said, we're going counterclockwise. All right. So branch number 1. Now your 0 is where you're standing. So my first branch is at 180 degrees. All right. So we can plug that in. We get 180 degrees. Plug that into the program. Okay. That's already there. So the first branch, 180 degrees. Now, when you figure out the second branch, now this is where people get a little bit confused. Okay. Darn it. This pencil doesn't even let me move. All right. So we're at 180 degrees for this first branch. Now you would think, okay, well, the second branch looks like it lines up, you know, right there, right about 140. Okay. It looks like it lines up right here. That's where I want my second branch. I want one at 180, the next one at 140. All right. Well, that's not really the way that works. All right. Unfortunately, what you're trying to do is you want to figure out how many more degrees. You're already at 180. How many more degrees do you need to go to get to 140? All right. Now you're not going minus or anything like that. So it's like a minus 40. You just go 40 more degrees. All right. So you figure 10, 20, 30, 40 degrees, go 40 more degrees and then make me another branch. All right. That's how that works. So if you had oops, I don't want to do that. So you're saying one at 180, go 40 more, 40 degrees, make me another one. Now, if we said make me go 40 more degrees and make me another one, you would go 10, 20, 30, 40. You would have another branch right here at 100. All right. Hopefully that makes a little bit of sense to you. So like I said, we're telling it to go make your first branch at 180 and don't worry about this top number here because that's going to be your finishing. That's going to get you back to 0. That's going to be your inlet part, where you're standing basically. Okay. All right. So first stop 180, make a branch right here, move 40 more degrees counterclockwise and make another one. All right. So right here, this should create that intersection. You can see how this changed here to 140. All right. And basically that's going 140 more degrees and that's moving us down here towards 0 location. So let's click go. All right. And we're going to get this protractor out of the way because we want to see how nicely that this lines up. Let's import it into the map. Get me out of there. I don't need to be in there. What am I doing? All right. Intersection. That's what I'm looking for. Let's get that in there. All right. Control B. All right. So you see, we have something that looks pretty close to what we wanted. All right. Get your intersection all lined up. Actually, that looks pretty darn good, I would say. All right, so that's how you figure out your angles. Now, hopefully I didn't confuse you guys on that. I think that looks pretty darn good. I would use that. Oops. Intersection picked up here. There we go. So what do you think? I say that looks pretty good. Definitely looks good. Matter of fact, I'm going to keep that one. That's going to be part of my new roadway, right? All right. So that's what I would do is I would figure out the angles. I would go through from section to section. Okay. So I started on this intersection. My next stop is going to be down here at this intersection. So I would do it all over again. All right. I would create an intersection using these angles. Now, like I said, you got to make sure the way you're doing this. Now I'm going to be facing this way. It doesn't matter which way you face. All right. So I'm going to start here. This is going to be 0. And I'm going to go counterclockwise until I get to my first angle, which is going to be right there. That's going to be my first branch. All right. So if I get off of my pencil tool, bring this protractor over. All right. And if you guys want, I mean, you can download it. I mean, I made this just for demonstration purposes. But every now and then I will refer to a similar tool. I'll just Google it really quick and figure out my angles if I need to. All right. So looking right here, we're going to want our first branch to be around, let's try 255. Okay. So let's go to our program and put our first branch in 255. All of these angles here, by the way, cannot add up to more than 360 degrees if you haven't figured, or at least if you haven't assumed that, because then you'd be going full circle. All right, so 255, and we want to figure out how many more degrees until we get to this. All right, so we're at 255. So let's go 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60. So let's say an additional 70 degrees that we want to go. Okay, let's see what we get from there. So we're telling it to go an additional 70 degrees and make our second branch. We'll click go. Let's minimize that. Get our protractor out of the way. And import our intersection. All right. Now, you're not always going to nail this the first time. You're going to have to, fine tune it a little bit. Maybe it didn't come out quite the way you wanted it to, and you might have to try it a few times. All right. So the way your intersection works, it's always the blue arrow is, oh wait, what did I do on this one? How did I come? Oh, you know what I did? I am such a dummy. Get rid of that one. All right, forget it. Let's bring the protractor back up. What was I doing? These guys probably see me doing that the whole time. All right, at 0, geez almighty, I want to be at maybe 110, 115 maybe. All right, so I was using the outer one that would have went this way. So counterclockwise, that would have been okay. But I need that inner ring, not the outer ring. It's late, I'm getting tired. So you figure about 115, and then you still want to go another 70. So let's change this to 115. Try that again. All right, like I was saying, the blue arrow should always be facing away from you. can just try to line this up somewhat. And actually that one looks pretty darn good too. You can tell I've been doing this for a little bit. All right. So there you go. There's two intersections that I made very easily that didn't first try. It helps to have like a protractor or something where you can figure out your angles without having to guess at them. So that does definitely help. So I'll recap it one more time just so you guys, just to go over it. Like I said, you want to 0 is where you're going to be facing. Doesn't matter which, you could be over here on this side, you could be on this side. It doesn't matter. Just pick a point and looking away from you, right? You want to go start from your starting point, which is 0. Wherever you're standing, go counterclockwise. All right. And how many degrees to your first branch? All right. So maybe you're making a T intersection, right? Like this. So that would be 90 degrees to your first branch, right? So you're at 0. So in your boxes there, the first number you would put is a 90. All right. And then for your second branch up here, right, that would be what? 90 more degrees. Okay. So you want to do it that way. And then that's it. And it would fill in the rest for you. And you would end up with an intersection that looks like that. Now, let's say if you wanted your intersection facing the other direction, it's coming in from left-hand side. Well, now you would go 180 degrees, right? And then 90 more degrees to get this next branch. Hopefully you understand that, right? I feel like it's pretty simple. But in the beginning, when I was learning how to use this program, it was very frustrating. And for a pretty good while, I hadn't quite figured out how in the heck they were making their angles. Like, what numbers do I need to plug in there to make these angles? Now you can see once you have it figured out, no problemo, right? Everything comes together fairly nicely, super easy. Now from here, once I have this done, the very next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start prepping everything for getting my road surface put in there. And that we're going to be using Spline Street Constructor for that. All right. So I'm going to probably wrap this up, I think, because we've been going for a little while here. If anybody has any questions at all, definitely feel free to hit me up in the comments or on the website. Go over to the forum, hit me up in there somewhere, and I'll help you get things sorted out. But I can't recommend enough, like I said, to go through the instructions and familiarize yourself with the program. What does what everything means. Play around with it, experiment a little bit, like I said. And then before you know it, you'll definitely be making, you'll be making some pretty fancy intersections like we have here. Okay. Don't be one of those guys that, when you're making, I see guys that don't even use the Crossing Constructor, right? They just butt one road up against the next when they're making it, they'll run the street like, up to here. And then if there's an intersection, they don't even bother putting, a regular crossing in there. They just, butt the road pieces up together. And I don't think that always doesn't look quite so good, right? But let's do this the right way. Let's do it the nice way. So like I said, play around with your subdivisions, play around with your textures, play around with like the radius, stuff like that, and get yourself, just try it out. All right. Because the very next thing that we're going to do is we're going to jump into the Spline Street Constructor and start explaining a few things with that. That one is probably going to take a couple videos all on itself. All right. So hopefully this made some sense to you guys. Like I said, any questions, hit me up, all that good stuff. You found this helpful, useful, any way, shape or form, like and subscribe. You know the deal. With that being said, I am Bauer Brown and I will see you on the next one.